Hello, everybody. My name is Rachel, and I am the current chair to the APTA New Jersey Student Assembly. Along with Adam, the outgoing New Jersey Corps Ambassador, David, the incoming New Jersey Corps Ambassador, and Greg, the Vice Chair to the APTA New Jersey Student Assembly, we have put together a quick presentation about financial literacy, or, as some would say, mo money, mo problems.
So what we will cover today is why this is a problem, a major burden for us, as well as some loan basics, tips for borrowing in the grace period, and finishing off with what the APTA and a company called FitBucks is doing to help our problem. And to really show a big picture view of why this is a major burden, please refer to the picture on the right. This shows the amount of inflation for tuition and textbooks over the last 20 years. This picture was from Vala Afshar, a chief digital evangelist from Salesforce and a blogger on the Huffington Post. Before we dive in a little bit deeper, first I'd like to thank Rachel Selena, Alan Frenenal, Dan Crusoe, and Lyra Galati, students from the University of Michigan Flint, for giving a similar presentation to their peers and allowing us to use some of their research for this presentation today. As shown on this slide, it almost costs $190,000 for a bachelor's degree at Columbia University. Back in 1940, you could have attended Yale for 27 years straight at the same cost. What's even more disturbing is that until the 1980s, some schools and universities were completely tuition-free. Something else existed before the 1980s called federal Pell Grants, which covered 66% or more to college tuition. These grants did not have to be repaid back after graduation. Now, 60% of all Americans use loans to pay for college. 40% of these borrowers are graduate students such as us. Focusing on PT student loan debt. 86% of students are borrowing to pay for PT school. Only 21% of us are receiving any type of scholarship or grant. One major problem can be quickly summarized by a quote from Dr. John Childs, founder of Evidence in Motion and an innovator, leader, and disruptor and forward progress for the profession. He says that too many PT programs, over 220 compared to 141 medical schools, with small class sizes, all of which share the same inefficient brick and mortar model. What's he essentially saying? That with these low class sizes, creates a low supply, high demand environment. Economics 101 will always say that this will lead to inflation and higher tuition costs.
How does a loan work? In order to understand how a loan works, you need to understand all the parts to a loan. The first is the loan amount. This is the amount of money originally loaned to the individual. The next is the initial term. This is in years or months, and that's the amount of time you have to pay off your loan. For example, if you take a look at this chart, this is a 10-year loan or 120 months. The next is the interest rate. This is the percentage of the remaining balance that you pay extra each month. And finally is the monthly payment, which is a combination of the principal payment and the interest payment. Like stated, the remaining balance is decreased by only the principal payment and not the interest payment. As the remaining balance decreases by that principal payment, so does the interest rate that you pay monthly. But your monthly payments stay constant. Let's compare long-term to short-term loans. For a long-term loan, you pay less per month, meaning your principal payment is less, but your interest rate will stay the same regardless of if you are using a long-term or a short-term loan. This in turn reduces your remaining balance slower. So the take-home message, a shorter-term loan means overall you're paying less. Finally, there's a thing called prepayment, which is a predetermined amount of money that the individual decides to pay in addition to the monthly payment. This will decrease your remaining balance faster.
Hi, my name is David Lin. I'm here to talk to you today about borrowing. For borrowing, there are two types of federal loan options. Option number one, federal Stafford loans. Option number two, federal Graduate Plus loans. For option number 1, Stafford loans, the interest rate is 5.31%. And for Federal Graduate Plus loans, the interest rate is 6.31%. You want to start with Federal Stafford loans because the interest rate is lower. You can only borrow up to $20,500 per year though, with a total of $138,500 including undergrad. So after you could borrow the maximum amount that you need for Stafford loans, you switch to Federal Graduate Plus loans, where the maximum amount you could borrow is the cost of attendance. And what's great about federal loans is the interest rate is fixed even after you graduate. And for Stafford loans, you can have bad credit, but for Graduate Plus loans, you need good credit. And for both types of federal loans, after 10 years in public service, you might be able to qualify for loan forgiveness program, which will eliminate all your outstanding balance after 10 years in public service. For the next type of loans you can borrow are private loans. Private loans are non-federal loans by a lender like a bank, credit union, state agency, or school. And they may require you to pay during school. They have a higher interest rate, and you might require good credit and a co-signer. So overall, if you're going to borrow for graduate school, stick with federal loans and not private loans.
Now that we have discussed the loan basics in borrowing, let's talk about grace periods. Students often have many misconceptions as to the length of time they have before they must begin repayment. To define a grace period, it is the amount of time before students must begin repayment on their loans, and they are designed to help students get settled and find employment before beginning repayment. This period begins after graduation, leaving school, or dropping below half-time status. As mentioned already, grace periods may differ depending on the type of loan. For example, federal student loans often have a grace period of at least 6 months. However, this period differs between Stafford and Perkins loans, with Stafford loans having a period of 6 months and Perkins loans having a grace period of 9 months before repayment begins. These loans may or may not accrue interest during that time, depending on if they are subsidized or unsubsidized. Other federal loans, such as Graduate Plus and Parent Plus loans, have no grace period, and repayment must begin immediately following graduation, leaving school, or dropping below half-time status. Aside from federal loans, many private loans do allow borrowers a grace period, but this may differ depending on the loan service provider, so it is important for students to monitor the status of their loans to determine when repayment begins. While grace periods are a set amount of time, they may change for certain circumstances. Grace periods may change for students who are called for active military duty, students who return to school after a period of absence, and students who decide to consolidate their loans. Students on active military duty or students who return to school before the end of the grace period may have their full grace period restored. However, while loan consolidation may be helpful and considered, it will also forfeit the remainder of the grace period and repayment will begin immediately. It is also important for students who are still in school or who have entered their grace period to remember that no payment due should not be misconstrued as do not make payments. Making payments whenever possible will help to lower the principal and manage any accruing interest.
In case you didn't know, one bit of exciting news is that our voices were heard. Last year, a student-led motion was passed at the House of Delegates called RC 1116. Over a year later, as recently as last month, the APTA launched its Financial Solutions Center. As an APTA member, you have access to financial literacy education and refinancing options, as listed on the slide. Please follow the links for further information. One downside is with our colleagues. The American Medical, American Dental, and American Chiropractic Associations have all been able to secure much better refinancing options. This can be easily reflected by the number of members in their national organizations. With specifics to the APTA, the majority of members continue to be students. We need to continue to support the APTA and chase that 100K membership so that we can secure better refinancing options for our future. For example, a reduction of 6.84% to 1.9% would save you $30,000 over 10 years on a balance of 100K. FitBucks is another company aimed to help PT students with their financial debt and planning. The CEO has happened to be also married to a physical therapist who has undergone fellowship training at Kaiser Permanente's North program. Through this system, you are given a FitBucks score. This is taken through a survey and takes into account something called human capital. After you've taken the survey, you can schedule a free financial consult where they help you walk you through their system and plan out which strategy is best using any of the government repayment options. FitBucks is something I highly recommend as a student. I've been able to utilize their software and have conversations with their CEO, Joseph Ranke, in coming up with a plan to pay off my student loans. So in this example, after you input all your student loans and interest rates, you'd see a graph such as this. Up at the top are the different strategies that they would cover during that phone call and consult. Using a standard 10-year payment plan, which is represented by the black line, it'd be about $450 a month. Utilizing this software and a FitBucks score with prepaying, for example, a $900 per month payment plan, you'd be able to pay off these loans in less than 5 years.